Forgot my microphone. I just like to call the meeting to order. Sorry, folks. We acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of the First Nation, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, and of the Huron-Wyandot people. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and of all the original peoples of Turtle Island who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. Any declarations of conflicts of interest from members of council? Okay, seeing none, I'm looking for a mover that we adopt the published agenda for March 20th. Councillor McGuire-Blaise, Councillor Allard, any questions on the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor? Reports from administration. Report from Rita Jabbour, our manager of planning services, and we will go to Ms. Jabbour first, and then we'll take a motion for that after. Welcome, and welcome to the members of our audience.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Through you, we're here tonight to consider a residential subdivision located at 80 Maidstone Avenue West in Essex Centre, Ward 1. Next slide, please. The purpose of tonight's meeting is simply to inform council and members of the public that are here tonight of the looming subdivision. We're not making any decisions throughout this hour. That'll be presented in a separate report at 6 p.m. And I just want to make a note here for those who are familiar with the subdivision process in the past. Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act, has changed the process a tad. Instead of a public meeting where we have to have a meeting to listen to the public and gather any input and gather any concerns, that is no longer a requirement. We are instead having information meetings to inform members of the public about what will be happening in their backyard, because obviously it's a big development and members of the public and council should be informed of the specifics of the development before it is approved. Next slide, please. So we're going to delve in a little bit deeper into the subject lands. Next slide, please. As I said earlier, the subject lands are located in the Essex Centre primary settlement area. And if we refer to the slide on the screen, the area that's outlined in a red dotted line, the area basically that's yellow, blue, red, within that little triangle is the Essex Centre primary settlement area. The settlement area is where we are to direct any type of growth. And that growth can be residential, industrial, or commercial. This is where residential growth is designated and where it's to be directed first and foremost. Planning authorities such as myself and town council must encourage residential intensification in these settlement areas. Residential intensification can be done by way of rezoning, by way of plans of subdivisions, or any changes in zoning policy to the official plan or zoning bylaw to allow for greater housing opportunities in that settlement area. I've tried my best to identify the location of the subject lands on this map. So if you have really good eyes, you're going to see a brownish star on the map locating the general location of the property. It's a very small property, so it's really hard to identify. But in the next few slides, we're going to show you more of a bird's eye view of where it is in Essex Centre. Next slide, please. So this is much, much better. The area outlined in blue is 80 Maidstone. It's the subject lands. And you can see that the lands front on Maidstone Avenue West. They're located next to the Greenway. So that is the former Queso line, which was owned by CN Rail, which is now owned by the Essex Region Conservation Authority. And the lands are also abutting other residential types of uses. Primarily, you'll see homes on Bell Avenue, as well as it abuts Hunter Park, which is a publicly owned municipal park in the town of Essex. Next slide, please. So I said a lot of what's on this slide, located on the south side of Maidstone Avenue West, west of the Bell Avenue intersection. The lands are designated for residential development in the official plan. So again, we've identified them as being suitable for residential purposes. In terms of the zoning, in terms of what we've identified these lands can be used for, they are zoned to permit medium density residential dwellings. So this would include such dwellings as your single detached dwelling, which most people would recognize as a single family home. They're zoned to permit semi-detached dwellings, which are essentially two homes that are attached at the side. And they're also zoned to permit townhomes, which are essentially a minimum of 3 dwellings attached at the side. Back in 2018, just to give you some history on these lands weren't zoned for residential purposes, but because they were designated for residential development in the official plan, an amendment to the zoning bylaw was applied for by the owner, and special building regulations were adopted by council at the time to allow for this type of medium density housing. There are special regulations concerning the height of the dwellings. Unlike a lot of lands in the settlement area, this zoning district restricts the size of a dwelling to 1 story. And there's special setback regulations as well. For example, 25 feet dwelling has to be from a rear lot line. And that's to recognize the existing character. There's residential surrounding this property, and it was meant really to reduce any impact to those adjacent neighbors. Another item to note is that the subject lands are also in a holding zone restriction. And what this restriction prevents is the construction of any buildings or structures until such time the plan of subdivision is approved by the County of Essex, and until such time the developer enters into a development agreement with the Town of Essex, and until such time services such as water, sanitary, stormwater sewers, and roads and lights are constructed. Until that time, the hold remains, meaning you won't see any actual construction of residential dwellings until that hold is lifted. But in the meantime, you will see construction relating to the implementation of services. Next slide, please. So again, just taking a look at the subject lands and where they are. They're adjacent to the Cipher Systems Greenway, which is an active transportation system, which is now managed by IRCA. They're adjacent to Hunter Park, which is a park that's owned and managed by the Town of Essex. And they're also within walking distance to Essex High School and the Essex Recreation Complex, which is just on the other side of Maidstone Avenue. Next slide, please. As with any application for plan of subdivision, we have to consider any environmental impacts there might be on the actual property or surrounding the property that we may need to look at a little bit more closely during the pre-consultation stage. So in this case, the lands are free of any natural heritage feature. So they don't contain any woodlot that would contain any endangered species. They're not located within 120 meters of an area of natural environment. They're not located within a floodplain or an area regulated by the Essex Region Conservation Authority, which would require special permits. And they're not located within a source water protection area, which is an area where there might be significant aquifers. And aquifers are essentially areas where we would draw drinking water if Lake Erie were ever to dry up. Next slide, please. So with any plan of subdivision, we also have to look at the servicing conditions. So this is the infrastructure that's going to service the dwellings. And in this case, the lands have access to Maidstone Avenue West, which is a road that is owned and assumed by the County of Essex. The subject lands also have access to municipal water, sanitary, and stormwater connections along the Maidstone Avenue West street frontage. Next slide, please. Here is a map which shows the servicing. So the area in yellow are your subject lands. The line in blue is your municipal water. That's a municipal pipe. The area in green is your storm sewer, and the area in red is your sanitary sewer. And of course, Maidstone Avenue West is your road. Next slide, please. So in the next few slides, we're going to look at the proposal that we are going to be considering at 6 p.m. Next slide, please. The proposed plan of subdivision is being brought forward by the property owner, which is an Ontario Limited 1552843, also known as Noah Homes, a local developer. They are proposing the creation of 10 lots for the construction of 20 semi-detached dwelling units and 5 blocks for the construction of 22 townhome dwelling units. So in total, if this subdivision is approved, we can see 42 dwelling units in total. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we wanted to provide you with a definition of what a semi-detached dwelling is. I tried to explain it a little bit earlier, but directly from our zoning bylaw, we define a semi as a dwelling. So a dwelling being a place where people live full time, as a building divided vertically into 2 dwelling units. A townhome, again, is a home in which a building is divided vertically into a row of 3 or more units. Each one of those units are separate homes for people. All units are attached by common interior walls. Next slide, please. Now, in this slide, it's a little hard to see, but this is the proposed plan of subdivision. So you'll see that there are, and I see it becoming a little bigger there. Okay, I think that helps a little. That there are 2 new local roads proposed, Street A and Street B. They both have cul-de-sacs at the very end. At the end of Street A, there's actually a proposed entrance into Hunter Park. And within Hunter Park, you'll see that there is going to be it's the obligation, the responsibility of the developer, an asphalt trail. And that was a condition of the sale of a portion of Hunter Park to expand the lot area of the lots along Street B. You'll also see 3 stormwater management ponds. Those are the darker gray area. And that's where stormwater, which is collected in storm sewers along the new roads, will dispel into and be slowly released into the storm sewers along Maidstone Avenue. So this is a way we control and we collect stormwater from new development. And you can also see the lotting makeup. So you'll see blocks, particularly along Street A, that are for townhome units. And you'll see lots, particularly on Street B, for semis. So again, each one of those lines represents a dwelling unit that can be sold to an individual. And the purpose of this subdivision is for individual freehold development. So each of these lots will be privately sold. Okay, next slide, please. So again, this plan of subdivision will consist of 3 new stormwater ponds, 2 new local roads, which will connect to Maidstone Avenue West. Also, sidewalks will be proposed for both streets. The developer will be responsible for providing cash in lieu of parkland, which is equal to 5% of the land value. And the reason why we're asking for cash in lieu is because the development is so close to an existing park, being Hunter Park. The applicant will also be responsible for constructing that trail throughout Hunter Park and access to it from Street A. And the proponent will also be responsible for paying for sidewalks along the Maidstone Avenue West right-of-way. And this is in support of our active transportation link along Maidstone. Next slide, please. So prior to this meeting, there is a lot of work that takes place behind the scenes in evaluating the technical side of a subdivision. So prior to us receiving an application and deeming it complete, we require studies such as an archaeological checklist, which would determine whether there's any archaeological potential on the site and if a full archaeological study is required. In this case, it was not. A checklist was received and it was deemed to be appropriately done. We also request stormwater management reports and plans from all proponents of subdivision to ensure that the stormwater management plan for the subdivision is in accordance with regional stormwater guidelines. And in this case, a report was received. It was reviewed by both the Town of Essex's Infrastructure Department, our third-party engineer, Stantec, as well as the Essex Region Conservation Authority, and it was deemed to be acceptable to all parties. The third item is a traffic impact assessment. So again, to provide a little bit of history on this development, the original development proposal back in 2018, when the lands were rezoned, were for an affordable housing development. Unfortunately, that did not happen because it was contingent on provincial funding, and that funding did not go through. But as a result of that development, the developer had to submit a traffic impact assessment, which had to assess the development impact on the roadway, so Maidstone Avenue West, as well as its impact on Bell Avenue at the intersection there, and its impact on Talbot Street, the intersection with that. That was submitted in 2018. Because it's been some time since that report was submitted, the proponent provided a letter from the same traffic engineer to reassess this new development and its impact on the same roadway system. This development actually provides for a couple less units. So the impact assessment returned that there was minimal impact on the roadway. Important to note too is that the traffic impact assessment looked at the impact of the Essex Town Center development, which is just down the street as well. So additionally, the proponent had to provide clearances from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry to clear that there are no endangered species or habitat that will be affected by this development. And that has been submitted and it's satisfactory. And the proponent received a development review clearance from the Essex Region Conservation Authority on the stormwater management report. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of the evaluation from planning, the proposed plan is in keeping with the land use designation under the official plan. So they're not proposing a use that's not allowed under the official plan. It's residential. And it's in conformance with lot regulations for the established zoning district under the town zoning bylaw. However, the proponent will require council resolution on a reduced right-of-way width for Street A, and that's proposed in the report at 6 p.m. So the lands are rather small, and in order to accommodate the lots, that right-of-way will need to be reduced from the requirement in the Development Standards Manual of 20 feet to 15.24 meters, which is 50 feet. Next slide, please. So as required with any plan of subdivision, we have a number of prescribed persons that we must circulate the subdivision plan to. And in the following slides, we are just going to outline the comments we received from those people. Next slide, please. So as of last Friday, we received comments from the following: the Essex Region Conservation Authority, the school boards being the Greater Essex County District School Board and the Windsor Essex County District School Board, Canada Post, and Bell Canada. So in terms of their comments, the school boards always comment on the need for sidewalks, and they always comment on the need for safe access to school buses. Canada Post is more so concerned with community mailboxes, and Bell Canada is more concerned with easements to allow for their infrastructure within the subdivision. The Essex Region Conservation Authority, they provided the development review clearance on the stormwater management plan, but they've also provided comments to the county. So again, the county is the approval authority. We are just one stakeholder in this. Just today, actually, and their comments indicate that they will want an exclusionary fence along the entire extent of the property line between the proponent's lands and the and the active transportation trail there. So that's just one of the comments that have come in from IRCA, but in terms of their comments, they are in agreement with the subdivision and the submitted plans for stormwater management. Next slide, please. So in terms of the town of Essex, administration is recommending the following conditions: that the applicant enter into a development agreement with the town, that the applicant pay development charges, that the applicant provide cash in lieu of parkland, that 5%, that the applicant be required to design and install a concrete sidewalk and all entrances thereto within Hunter Park, that the applicant be required to design that multi-use trail along Maidstone street frontage, and that the applicant be required to install sidewalks on both local roads. Next slide, please. Before I go on to next steps, just to go back to the last slide there, I want to note that these are the conditions that administration is bringing forward. Council can add conditions, they can change conditions in the planning report at 6 p.m. through council motion. They just have to ensure that the condition is reasonable. Now, I should add that we did receive, and I know there are persons in the room who wish to speak after this presentation, that we did receive comments from some members of the public, and I am not sure if council received these comments, but one of the comments is regarding the installation of a 6-foot-high privacy fence along the property located at 150 Maidstone Avenue West. Those persons couldn't be at town hall today, so they're kindly requesting that that council be circulated on their comments. And again, that's just a recommendation of theirs. Council will have to decide whether that's a reasonable condition to add. And of course, there's members in the public tonight who wish to speak who may bring up other matters. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, we're just going to flip to the next slide. Tonight at 6 p.m., council will need to provide a resolution on the recommended conditions as presented in Planning Report 2023-08. After that resolution is obtained, the County of Essex will provide their notice of decision to the town on the subdivision, on whether it's draft plan approved and what conditions come with that decision. Following that, if it's approved, the Town of Essex Planning Services will prepare a subdivision agreement for council adoption conditions. We will then execute the agreement with the proponent, and the proponent will then commence construction on municipal services such as roads, water, sanitary, storm, and electrical. Of course, prior to that, there is a financial security that must be submitted by the proponent, which is based on the value of the construction. The applicant then, after draft plan approval, has 3 years to satisfy all the conditions that come with that approval. When all those conditions are satisfied, and if those 3 years have not lapsed, the County of Essex will then provide final approval of the subdivision. And at that time, we will remove the hold. And then at that time, the lots can be sold and construction activity on the dwellings can commence. Next slide, please. So at this point in my presentation, we are just looking for questions. Thank you.
Laura, for that thorough presentation. I will go to a motion for council that we receive the presentation, and then we will ask questions to that to the presentation. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councillor Verbeek. Okay, I'm sorry, we can't hear when you're talking. Okay, so okay. If you want to have a discussion, just please take it out in the hall. Thank you. Any questions from members of council to our administration? Deputy Mayor Shepley.
You, Madam Mayor, I have a question on the IRCA recommendation on the fence. Based on IRCA's recommendation, is that something they'll have to do, or is it something that we would have to endorse for them to do, or can we avoid that?
Thank you. Through you, Ms. Mayor. So that's a recommendation that IRCA has made to the county. The county will decide whether that's a reasonable recommendation. We are just looking for your conditions as the town of Essex.
Thank you through the chair. You had said that to keep in line with the community, it was 20, we were giving 25 feet. Is that from the rear or is that from the front? Is it 25 feet from their neighbors in the rear or 25 feet from the road? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Ms. Mayor. So for as any semi or townhome, it's 25 feet from the rear lot line in the dwelling.
Mr. Boer? Counselor Garen?
Couple questions on the properties that back onto on Bell Street, that back onto the new development proposed. Not sure how old those homes are, but do we know if they have rear yard drains? That's my first question.
As a condition of the subdivision and stormwater management, each individual lot will require a stormwater or rear yard drain.
Do the properties on Bell have them?
Through the mayor, we wouldn't have that information. The properties on Bell are responsible for their own drainage, but we do have a practice in line with development services that when a new subdivision comes online, we do send notice to adjacent property owners, and we offer assistance with anybody for drainage related concerns.
Further. And then the other question I had with, and it's maybe to the builder, just looking at the layout here of the property lines, backing on the ones that are be backing on to Bell, would the fence, would the duplexes be wider than the existing lots on Bell, or would they be similar? I can't tell by the drawing what the dotted line represents. I'm assuming it is the shared property line between the two dwellings. Am I correct in thinking that?
Sir, you want to take that? Okay. We'll need you to go up to where Mr. Boer is, to the microphone. We are live streamed, so we want to make sure our home audience sees all of our questions and answers too. Thank you.
So the units on Street A are the townhomes, and they'll be currently they're on the drawing showing blocks, and they'll be subdivided into 28, 30, 35 foot once they're built, they're created. And the reason why we're doing townhomes on Street A is under the current zoning, it's 1 story that's mandatory on Street A, and so we're doing 1 story townhomes. And the semi-detached proposed will be on Street B, which are 2 story in height. So that's the reason behind, in case anybody had any questions on that.
Try to imagine how many individual townhouses, like, would they be permitted to put fences up? Like, how many fences would one of these Bell Street residents be looking at in their backyard? Could it be potentially, like, I'm looking at part 3, looks like it's got 2.5 units that are going to be stretched through that one, 3 on another one, and I can't tell on the end units. Just wondering how many backyards are going to be abutting some of these individual properties on Bell.
Yeah, it appears that the existing properties on Bell are approximately 60 to 70 feet in width. So you're approximately 2 residents, approximately maximum, backing on to any individual resident.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. So now within that duplex, can a fence be ran between the 2 units right to the Bell property?
These are townhomes, so these are 3 or 4 units. So to have access, so the exterior unit to have access to the interior, the fence cannot be at the rear. There's 10 feet at the rear that has to be for a registered easement, so that the property in the interior unit has the ability to get to the rear yard from the side yard.
What I'm actually talking about is from the unit to the back property line. If I have 4 units or 2 units, between the 2 units, can I run an outside fence, another fence in between the units and then another fence? Or is it just 2 fences for 2 shared units?
There would be a fence at each property line could be put up. We built some townhomes in other communities, and typically we're not seeing fences as a general rule. Typically, again, these are a seniors project, so we're having them more of an open. We have seen some with fences, but again, they have to leave an access to an easement access to get to their rear of their property. So they technically wouldn't be touching right to the rear property line.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just, I have to first. Oh. Okay, so through you, Madam Mayor, just a quick comment to Manager Jabbour. Man, you're getting good at giving these reports. Thank you. Any question I had after reading through the report, you answered while you presented. So thank you for that. And I just, so I know your first kick at the can, the idea was attainable and affordable units. I just want to say I respect that so much, and I am so grateful to the group that's coming forward and willing to put some homes on this piece of property. Really, and respect that the first effort was there to make them more affordable and that. And did I just hear you say they're going to be kind of like geared to seniors? Is that your, like, what demographic are you aiming at? Like, are these going to be like high-end places, or are we still hoping to answer our, the need for more attainable homes?
Yeah, so due to the size of the property, width and depth, the square footages are smaller in size. And they're one level, so they're 1 story, low to the ground. And so the attraction would be for senior or young professional that's on a lower price point, I guess, for home ownership. And so these are definitely what they are, attainable housing. And this is something that, our government currently right now is really pushing for. It's something that we as the development community have to step up and get involved, because homeownership is becoming more and more out of reach for so many. And so, yeah, these are definitely, 900, 800 square foot homes, units.
Much respect and gratitude for that, because it's hard for us to come by that right now in a lot of municipalities. So thank you for taking on this project in our municipality.
Sorry, through the chair. So I have 2 questions. You had said the traffic assessment was done and then it was redone. Do we have a time, like when was it redone?
Through you, Ms. Mayor. So it wasn't redone, it was revisited. The original one was done in 2018 and it was revisited in 2022.
And what does that mean, revisited?
So looking through you, Ms. Mayor, revisited means looking at the original report against the new development. And I had mentioned in my presentation, with the older development, the affordable housing development in 2018, there were actually a couple more units proposed. So they were looking at this new layout and this new plan and determining whether there's going to be any changes to the impact to the roadway system. And of course, because Essex Town Center is a little bit more built up now as well.
So through the mayor, so this is taking into consideration the new subdivision that's down the road behind Canadian Tire. The new traffic assessment is taking into consideration that huge development plus this development, just so that way the town is aware that we are paying attention to the amount of growth and the amount of traffic that is going to be traveling down Maidstone Avenue. Is going to be something we've never experienced before, especially at the moment. And I don't know how long it's going to take. It is the only way in and out of Essex from the highway from Windsor.
Yes, that's correct. We definitely have an eye on that development. And just a note on Essex Town Center, any new phase of that development will be subject to another traffic impact assessment.
Question, Counselor McGuire Blaze is a good one. Counselor Allard?
The point made of reduction of right of way with the street A, is there a reason for that?
Through you, Ms. Mayor. So just to answer your question, Counselor Allard, yes. So the land area that's devoted for Street A, because of the road and because of the land that you need for the servicing from Bell, Canada, from Hydro, there just isn't enough room there to have 60 feet and still have a viable development on that street. So that's the reason for the reduction in road right away width. And those services that would normally be in a public right of way will, some of them will be in easements, which will run along the actual lots.
Last questions, on the sidewalks and the trail, what sidewalks on one side of each street or both sides of the streets, A and B? And if anyone can answer the question, I'm just curious what the width of the trail would be on Maidstone.
Through you, Ms. Mayor, I'm looking at Director Gerard, but I'm going to try to answer the. So sidewalks would be on one side of Street A and Street B. Okay, we haven't gone into detailed design yet, but it'll be identified at that stage. And in terms of the width, I'm sorry, did you say along Maidstone Avenue West? Yes, we haven't determined that yet. Again, we have to go into detailed design to determine what it should be in terms of width, but we're grappling with either 2.5 meters or 3 meters. And if Director Gerard has anything to add on that, I'll pass it along to him.
That would be county driven anyways, wouldn't it? No?
No, it's a condition of the actual subdivision that the town is imposing to send to the county.
But it will be continued eventually by the county, I'm assuming, or by the town? So they'd want it to be the same width if it was a county?
Through the mayor, so that pathway is identified under the CWATS master plan as a link to the entire network. The town is trying to work with the county right now to change its use from a on-street shoulder to a separated multi-use trail. And that should be identified through the CWATS master plan. In addition, we are working with, current and future developers to try and work with them to get pieces like this. So this development being, the first one in front of council would be that first segment and achieving that entire pathway along that stretch.
Darren, Counselor Mady?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. So a couple questions on fencing. IRCA asked that, or commented that they'd like to have a fence along the subdivision next to the Queso Trail. Hunter Park also butts that, right? Is there going to be a fence along Hunter Park, or are you still going to be able to access the trail from Hunter Park?
Belong to Director Morissette.
Through Mayor Bondi, so there is a fence there right now. So that nothing would really have to change from that aspect of it. If we did get to the stage where we'd want to open it up so that people could have access, we could look at that in future budgets. But to my knowledge, I believe that it does go down into a ditch in that area. So we might have to look at how we would figure that out.
Just to add to that, through detailed design, we will be assessing the grading between the park and the adjacent development. So if the development does increase in elevation quite a bit, where it may impact the park, we would request that retaining wall be placed along the park, which could impact fencing. We don't know the direct answer to that at this moment, but through detailed design, that's something that we would work with the developer on.
Anything further, Councilor Meady?
You, Madam Mayor. Yeah, and then it sounded like there was some concern for the fencing, the houses, the properties that are on Bell right now. Would the developer be okay with putting a fence along the back of those properties that was being asked for? That way they're not looking at a possibility of 10 or 15 fences there?
Ask the developer. I don't know if you, Walter or Rob, want to answer that. If so, we have to go to the mic again. Sorry.
So I guess there's a few newer counselors now, and I think maybe I should explain what we went through 4 years ago and the difference between affordable and just in case, the clarification. So in 2018-19, ourselves and the town of Essex were working very collective to try to bring affordable rental units, geared to income, to the community under federal, provincial funding grants. And at the time, we wanted to score higher points, so we offered to put in a asphalt trail along Maidstone Avenue at the time, and that was there. And some of the residents had concerns about, having rentals in their rear yards and so on and so forth. And again, so we could secure our applicant, and we said, okay, if the fence is required, to satisfy, because separation between rental versus home ownership. Now, fast forwarding, our intent is, as Councillor Verbeeken mentioned, this is strictly attainable housing, the most price point that people can afford that's not available currently right now that we're trying to provide. In that, now under current bylaw, under the mail, it's stating sidewalks are on each side of the road. So that, obviously is now an added cost, added surprise. The intent was to have maybe with IRCA purchasing the greenway, there'll be a nice connection. But as Director Gerard has stated, the elevation of the, current lands, you're approximately 8 feet in height. So I'm not sure how even a fence would even benefit the separation between the IRCA lands. So again, it's just, we're getting to a point where this is not even, our intent is attainable, but if we start adding fences and sidewalks and trails and park, we're really, we've really not accomplished anything. Like, and we're not really following what, Bill 23 is telling us what the development community is having to do. So we're willing, yes, to answer your question, we're willing to accommodate, but I'm not so sure it's going to have to be give and take, because currently right now it's, it's a trail, it's the sidewalks, and now it's an IRCA fence. So, we're getting out of what is really, and development fees and park, which is totally opposite of what Bill 23 or, to try to stay attainable, because we have to offer a price point that people can afford. Everybody's getting priced out of the housing market. And clearly you can see this development is not a traditional one due to the size of it, the size of the properties and whatnot. So hopefully that clarifies, everyone's in the room. So yeah, there's some history with this property, but again, just wanted to answer that. Thank you.
We'll go to one more question from Councillor McGuire Blaze, and then we will go to we have a delegation here in the audience.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. It's not a question really. I just have a comment to make on top of what our representative from Noah Homes just said. I also want to point out to the community that we are giving up portion of our park in lieu of a trail and in lieu of sidewalks. So we are giving up part of our park for their development, which they're going to sell, and we're getting a pathway in return. So I just want the public to be made aware that we're not take. It is a give and take situation, and we shouldn't feel bad for asking for a trail. Thank you.
Squire Blaze, we have a motion on the table that we received the presentation. So all in favor of that motion? That's carried unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to delegations. We have John Hunt and Catherine Hunt to speak to council. Please go to the back where the microphone is there, please, John. And you have 5 minutes, and then council can ask questions. And welcome.
Through the mayor. My name is John Hunt. I live at 71 Bell Avenue in Essex. We have talking to all of our residents that are on Bell Avenue, and I'm speaking on their behalf as well. There's a few concerns that I have that are like extreme concerns to me. Number one, I appreciate that there was a traffic impact done in our local area, but I am concerned now that with the addition of Victoria Avenue being cut off as a main artery into the center of town, as well as this development and the development, as well as Home Hardware is now going to be the main hub for everyone to go to get their hardware supplies in the town, that the traffic impact is irrelevant at this point. And I am asking the council to at least look into the option of redoing the impact just to see. Also, in regards to that, I am concerned at the corner of Talbot and Maidstone Avenue, and I know the town is looking at possibly doing some renovations to that intersection. With us living in that area, we are highly impacted by speeding cars coming down Bell and racing around the corner through Thomas as a cut through, which is a possible danger, not only to high school kids, but to my child who is 10-year-old with a TBI. We hear squealing tires coming through our area, which is unacceptable. And the reason being is because they're being held up by a traffic light that could be as many as 4 times before they can actually access through the intersection where Tim Hortons clogs it up. So I'm asking the town to just consider those options and look and maybe reassess and maybe push off this development until Talbot and Maidstone gets repaired. In regards to the actual building, I appreciate too that many of you spoke in regards to fences. I am asking also as well that a fence be put up abutting to 71 Bell to mitigate noise and the danger to, number one, my son. I can't afford to put up a fence. And as well as on top of that, the drainage in the back of our yard. Now we have to consider that cost on us as taxpayers as well. I'm asking if it's possible, if Walter would agree to do some form of like a mutual drainage agreement abutting our lands so that we won't have to worry about dealing with our own drainage. Yeah, like the fence is the one issue and the traffic impact was the major issues that I had like to bring before council at this point.
Thank you, John. We did receive your pictures in our agenda package. Any questions from members of council to our delegations? Deputy Mayor Shepley.
Quick question. When I listened to you talk there, you were talking about you would like the developer to take care. Do you currently have a water issue that you are dealing with that you want him to, our developer to take care of?
According to through the mayor, according to my understanding, that current land does not have any form of drainage in it whatsoever. So there has been, and it's not on my property, but where my property line ends, there has been water, the standing water behind my land that is in that land.
Just a supplemental, it's my understanding that they're going to be putting in a rear yard drainage system, which will take care of their water, which should solve that problem for you. I don't think they would have to do anything for your property necessarily. Is that they'll take care of their water, which what we would require, I would assume.
One more point that I have to bring up. When this was discussed back in 2018, there's an issue on my land. So currently on the front of my property on Bell, this main storm drain that is there, there is a connecting pipe that runs under my land and connects to Maidstone. It goes through the property. And if I have the picture, I could actually point it out to you. That pipe that runs is a storm sewer pipe, and it's actually collapsed. It's collapsed underneath my house and where the driveway is. Township has ran a camera down. They can't get through. It's fully collapsed. So that stormwater is actually going into my land at this moment, and it connects to the Maidstone storm sewer. So I'm asking at some point, if Walter does dig up that portion, would it be possible for him to properly cap the back end of that pipe so that it mitigates the water going into my land?
Raising those concerns. Director Gerard, is there anything that we can suggest for the Hunts in terms of their drainage?
Mayor, so I am aware of the pipe that runs through the property. That file is actually with our Capital Works division. It was encountered when we completed the sidewalk. I think it's a reasonable request to take a look at the stormwater pipe and the condition that it's in on the developer's property. So that's something that we can look at. Typically, the issue that we see when a development occurs adjacent to existing area is that the subdivision itself will typically control its own water through rear yard catch basins and drainage. The issue tends to be that over long periods of time, as those lands were vacant, that the stormwater will actually existing situation is that stormwater will travel across the existing neighbors or the existing residents' property and onto that old vacant field. So that water becomes cut off and it starts to pond in their backyards. So we've seen this many times with new development, which is why we initiated a new practice with development services where we actually send out notice to the adjacent landowners, and the building department and our public works department will actually meet with residents, work together to try and figure out solutions for them to install or find a drainage solution for them.
Gerard, I just want to comment on the Talbot and Maidstone. This is a new term of council, and we head into our strategic planning sessions really soon, where we get to set our priorities for the next 4 years. And I will say, over the last 10 years of being on council, we've heard over and over again that the Talbot Maidstone corner is something that needs to be addressed. So this council will be having further discussions about that. Any other questions or comments to the delegates? Okay, thank you for coming out tonight. So looking for a motion that we receive the delegation by John and Catherine Hunt, Councillor Guerin, and Deputy Mayor Shepley. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor. We do have an item of correspondence on our agenda, correspondence to be received at the correspondence dated March 15th from Wayne and Renee Mills, and it was also regarding a fence on Bell be received. Looking for a mover and a seconder, and then we'll have comments. Councillor McGuire Blaze, Councillor Mady, any questions or comments to that correspondence? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of receiving that? That is received. I do want to make a comment to the developer. You are, out of all the developers we've worked with here at Town Hall, you're one of the top shelf developers. I agree with what Councillor Verbeek has said. So, we're lucky to have you. You are a really good corporate citizen, and looking at some of your homes in Parkland Estates, whew, gorgeous. So I know that development is hard and change is hard in areas that have been vacant, but I'm really glad it's you that is driving the bus in that area, because I do think you're a top-notch developer. So thank you. Okay, as for this meeting, so we have delegations on the list, sorry. So as for this meeting, we will look to adjourn, and then this file will be continued in our next meeting, so you can stay. We have a couple other delegations before, so it might be a little bit. Grab a bathroom break. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councillor Verbeek, any questions? Seeing none, all in favor of adjournment. We'll see you in a few minutes.